Welcome to the conversation on News Central TV. I am Rita Omodia. On the conversation, we get to discuss political issues trending around the African continent. Now, today on the program, we'll begin with the developing story in Chad, where the military government's failure to abide by its promise of handing over power after an agreed initial 18-month period has driven protesters to the streets in the Chadian capital in N'Djamena, resulting in the death of at least 30 people. And in Nigeria, we will also be remembering the events of one of the biggest demonstrations in the country's modern history, the End SARS protests against police brutality, which rocked the country and culminated in the unforgettable Lekki Tollgate incident on October 20, 2022. 2 years after, what has changed? Well, do stay with us. Now, 2 years after the controversial October 20, 2020 Lekki Tollgate incident in Lagos, southwestern Nigeria, some Nigerians staged a memorial walk at the Lekki Tollgate Plaza, waving the Nigerian flag and mock coffins. The judicial panel of inquiry set up by the Lagos state government to investigate petitions on police brutality in the state and alleged shootings of protesters on the 9th of October 2020 at the Lekki Tollgate on November 15. Submitted 2 reports, one on police brutality cases and another on the Lekki incident investigation. Its investigations concluded that there was tampering of evidence by Lekki Concession Company and that officers of the Nigerian Army and police shot at, assaulted and battered on armed protesters, which led to injuries and deaths. Following the submission of the panel's report, the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, constituted a 4-member committee that came up with a white paper on the recommendations of the panel, which stated that the findings of the panel that 9 people died from gunshots fired by the military were based on assumptions and speculations. Prior to the October 20 incident, Nigeria witnessed several days of protests calling for good governance, an end to police brutality, and the disbandment of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, a unit created in late 1992 to deal with crimes associated with robbery, kidnapping under the hashtag EndSARS. And now join us for this conversation, we have Mayowa John Ajibodu, a youth advocate and founder Sean Unemployment, joining us from Canada. We also have Deji Ajari, Executive Director, Sterling Center for Law and Development. We also have Dabira Oluwa Adeyinka, a political activist. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Wonderful. I don't know if we have Dabira online with us, but while we wait for Dabira, I'll begin with you. Mayowa. Now, Mayowa, 2 years on, how would you remember that day? Because there are a lot of stories concerning that day. Even I have my own story. But for you, the Lekki Tollgate incident, 2 years on, how do you choose to remember that day?
Well, I feel that day is sad. It's a sad day indeed. It's one of the days that we never leave our memory, right? Because up to date, no one has taken responsibility. No one has come to the front seat, to take responsibility for what happened that day. So many families are still in pain as we speak. So many lives are being destabilized. So October 2020 is indeed a sad day, especially in Nigeria and amidst the Nigerian youth. So yeah, it's a horrible day, and it's not an experience that we pray for our enemy to even experience, not to now say that a citizen is experiencing that in a nation that is not devoid of democracy. So to say that day is a sad day is an understatement. It's horrible. It's an horrible experience.
Now, after that day where there were investigations and the panel indicted, that judicial panel of inquiry set up by the Lagos state government, indicted the Nigerian Army and police, saying its officers shot at, assaulted and battered on armed protesters. But the Lagos State White Paper contradicted it and said there were discrepancies from the investigations of the panel of inquiry set up again, by the state government. I mean, Deji, what are your thoughts on this? First of all, the Lagos State setting up a panel of inquiry and then saying that those recommendations actually had discrepancies and contradicted the whole thing. Deji, can you hear me? Okay, Deji, if you can hear me, kindly unmute your device so that we can hear you. All right, while we wait for Deji to mute his device, Mayowa, it's back to you again. I mean, looking at the findings of the judicial panel of inquiry and what the Lagos State government said, because the panel of inquiry indicted the Nigerian police and the army and said that its officers shot at, assaulted and battered on armed protesters. But the Lagos State white paper contradicted it. What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you. So I think I have a bit of challenge with the panel of inquiry that was set up because when you set up a panel, you want to be able to get facts, right? The essence of setting up a panel is because you want to have facts. You want a panel that will not serve as nepotism. That you want a panel that will not be sentimental, that will not be biased in their result. You know, and unfortunately, this set of panels came up with results, and after a few minutes, after a few days, came back and, doctored the same report they gave because a ministry or a state government is asking them to say otherwise. I think I have a bit of challenge with that. And you see, they set up this panel there thinking that, yes, it's going to be a continuous exercise where we can have panels that can constantly investigate what is happening with the EndSARS people who are brutalized during the EndSARS period. Unfortunately, do we have that panel still ongoing? I doubt that. I don't think we have that. And some of the 5 on demands that Nigerian youths clamor for, to date, I can tell you for a fact that only limited things have been achieved with that. Even the Nigerian police guys that we are fighting for, asking that their salary should be increased and all of that. I remember that the president came and approved what he called the peculiar allowance. He approved what they call the peculiar allowance in December 2021, and up to date, nothing has been paid. They said the police are going to have 20% increments in their salary. Until now, police people came in June of this year saying that they don't have enough funds in their pockets to be able to accommodate that. So even the people you are fighting for are having problems because they don't have enough funds. And because that is the problem, it becomes a challenge to the Nigerian police. And they keep doing what they are doing. They need to extort people. They need to find a way to take people. So the panel of inquiry should get into action. Really, we want a continuous panel of inquiry that will be continuous, not panel of inquiry that will come when there is problem and come back later and doctor the report. I think I don't agree with the panel of inquiry that was set up if they cannot stand on their ground. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Mayowa. We also have joining us Dabira Olua. Now, Dabira, it's 2 years on. I asked Mayowa the same question because I know a lot of people have different ways to remember October 2020. So when you hear that day, it's 2 years on. Yesterday, there was a memorial walk at the Lekki Tollgate Plaza. How does that day, what does that day signify to you?
Good afternoon, everyone. October 20 would forever remain a day that history will never forget in our generation, because I happen to be one of the survivors. I narrowly survived. And that date has to be set aside because a lot of people died. And not like they died because they committed any offense or because they were criminals. They died because we are agitating for something that the system should have structured in place, which was the, 5-for-5 demand, improve our Nigerian police, increase their, welfare, give them good environment to live with. By so doing, probably they won't melt out their frustration on the innocent citizens that have become victims of, police brutality, SARS and all that. And that was why we just coined it and said EndSARS, And I don't think it was out of place. In all countries, protest is allowed. That is the only way you can express to, to the ruling class, or let me say to the government. And a lot of people died. I can attest to that. I have proofs. I am a living testimony. Someone took a bullet for me. He defended me by taking my own bullet when the gun was pointed at me, on that spot at Lekki Toll Gate. And I remember we were told that if we have Nigerian flag, the armies will respect the Nigerian flag. If we just raise it up and then we'll chant the national anthem, we won't be shot at. And I was screaming on top of my voice saying people should sit down, they shouldn't run, just raise your flags and stuffs like that. And little did we know that we signed up for something that I didn't believe that should be happening in this time and age, where it will look like we are in a system where democracy has become, impossible. It's a sad day for us. Yesterday we had a good start, but somewhere along the line, that attribute of the violence also came up again. They started putting out tear gas and then shooting in the air and stuff like that, dispatching the protesters. All we are just asking for is, you set up the panel. The panel has, given their white paper on the issue, and they also recognize that over 40-something people died, and that can as well be called massacre, and that the government should implement, those recommendations. And what we are saying is, without these recommendations being implemented, we will keep making these demands, and we won't stop making these demands. We have a lot of lives, a lot of people lost their properties, a lot of people, will live with that injury forever. We have a lot of people that are amputees. We can't keep silent. We can't be quiet. And it's also an eye-opener for some of us that have neglected, the affairs and say, it doesn't really concern me. Let me just live in Nigeria, and when I have my way, I can, be lucky to get. We all are locked up in this prison called Nigeria. It's an open prison, I call it. And until we get involved and we begin to speak out with our loud voice, nothing will change. Let's continue to speak. But I'm actually advocating for what I call a closure. Let us have a closure. We have a white paper, we have a recommendation. We want the government to step forward, we want the people to step forward and implement this. So that justice can be served and people don't feel marginalized even in their own country as citizens.
All right, thank you so much, Deborah. I'll get back to you, but I want to also hear from Deji. Deji is joining us right now. Now, Deji, we had the recommendations from the Judicial Panel of Inquiry set up by the state government, and then we had the white paper from the Lagos state government, which contradicted what the panel said. Would you fault the Judicial Panel of Inquiry, and what powers does the panel have to institute these recommendations?
Thank you for having me. First, the panel of inquiry does not have any powers to implement the recommendations. Only the Lagos state government have powers to implement those recommendations in their reports. And for me, what you have is a contradiction to the principles of fair hearing. The principles of fair hearing, one of the two pillars of fair hearing is that you cannot be a judge in your own cause. The principle is you cannot be a judge in your own cause. Now, in effect, Lagos state government was fingered as being behind the orders to attack the protesters at Lekki on that day. Now, whether that is true or not is a totally different thing, but having been fingered in that whole process, it is ordinarily not something that should have been, that panel of inquiry shouldn't have been one that will be set up by Lagos state government, because it is in effect being a judge in its own cause. Because whatever the recommendations of the panel of inquiry was, Lagos state government ultimately would be the ones to give effect to those recommendations. And of course, to the best of my knowledge to date, they have not been implemented. And it was not only, you see, the event of the events at Lekki Toll Gate on the 20th of October 2020 is a culmination of the frustrations of not just Nigerian youths, but I think quite a lot of well-meaning and right-thinking Nigerians about activities of not just the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, but the entire police force and other law enforcement agencies in using brutality to intimidate and harass citizens. Now, The question that we should be asking now, with the loss of lives, with the loss of properties, with the loss of confidence and all of that, can we really say as of today that those sacrifices that were made on all sides of the divide, are they worth it today? Have we really seen any changes? Has police brutality stopped, or has it reduced indeed? I don't think so. In my opinion, it has become business as usual. The government, when the vice president, I remember when the vice president then announced that, they were going to they had listened to the protesters, they were going to accede to all their 5 demands, and in demonstration of that, immediately ordered the disbandment of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SAS, and replaced it with the Special Weapons and Tactics Unit. I ask you, are you aware that SWAT, as they call it, is doing anything around the country right now? I don't think so. Those who were members or officers in the Special Anti-Robbery Squad have all been, would you say that there is a change? Even as of today, as we speak, intimidation, harassments, brutality is going on. Some of them are even captured on TV, on camera from time to time, and we see them. And so, for me, it is a clear indication that when the protesters were being begged to go back home and that they would implement all of their demands, they were going to give effect to all of their demands, and the protesters refused to go. They were recalcitrant. Everybody thought, oh, look, we were overdoing things. But it is now obvious that it is a result of a lack of confidence in the government that made those protesters refuse to leave until their demands were given effect, because it had become apparent that the government engages in lies all of the time. So all of those things, up until today, the welfare of the members of the police force is still the same. And we're not even just talking about salaries. There's a lot more when we talk about welfare of members of the force. There's a lot more beyond just welfare. We're talking about their barracks, their accommodation. We're talking about their pension issues. We're talking about their post-service issues. Those who died in service, what happened to their spouses? What happened to them? What happened to their entitlement? All of these things are the issues that we're talking about. They have not been addressed as we speak up until today. Now, beyond that, those who have been...
Hold on that. I want to bring Dabira into all this now. Talking about police reforms, police brutality. I mean, you saw what happened at the Lekki Tollgate Plaza. Do you also believe that there have not been enough changes to the Police Service Commission in Nigeria?
Yes, I strongly believe that there's not been literally any changes, because 2 weeks ago, a few weeks ago, over 2 weeks now, I was driving through my 2, and I had people that are non-uniform officers, with guns, broad daylight, like around 2 p.m., and they harassed my vehicle and started cocking their guns and asking my assistant to come down, and I'm like, wow, do we still have SARS in this state? Because I was thinking those have been, swept under the carpet. To the best of my knowledge, I found out, there's nothing really that have changed. And what we're asking for is reform the police. Let it be a routine check and probably 3 months training. And then let us have a checkmate from the Nigerian masses that balances the situation. Let's say we have a judiciary panel or jury, panel that, is an intermediary between the Nigerian masses and the Nigerian police that does checkmate. Let us have police people that are going beyond bars. So, let us have them, brought to book, because we can't continue to agitate for something and you still repeat the same, offense. And we didn't come out because we just want to come out and display. We came out because we want a Nigerian police that we'll see and be proud of. We are not different from them, and they are not different from us, but it's like there's no better understanding that we are also trying to fight for them, because they are melting out their own frustration on us. People I've seen videos where I see Nigerian citizen and a policeman dragging to a fort to the point where the person will be like, okay, this might be the end of my life, because he knows outrightly that if he gets to the police station, that is the end of him. Something may go wrong. So, but what we are calling for is this. We want the Nigerian police force to look into this. We have a lot of intelligent men in those offices. We have a lot of people that can put, measures into place to ensure that this country is livable for us. We can't continue to live in prison. We can't continue to have our system, bastardized at our own expense. And we are citizens of this country. And look at it. We are close to election, for instance. What can this system say he has produced that can add value to us as citizens of this country? We're not even proud of anything that has to do with the system. Talk more of the police system that harasses us at every given opportunity. We're not like, we're not like enemy against enemy. We're supposed to be, police supposed to be our friend, but it's the other way around. When we see a policeman, we put on our defense mechanism. When the policeman sees us, he puts on his arrogancy because he thinks that we are coming for him. And these things has to be balanced. There has to be a closure somewhere. That is my agitation, because if we keep going on like this, people are still dying on a daily basis.
All right, Dabira, hold on a bit. Now, Mayowa, see what Dabira is saying now. He's saying that there's still a lot of issues with the police system. Now, in the police defense yesterday, if we look at the events of the Memorial Walk, the police said that this was to prevent a hijack of the peaceful march or the Memorial Walk. Now, for you, do you think it was necessary for the police to have dispersed the Memorial Walk with tear gas and water cannons in their own defense?
I think so far, I think Nigeria still lack structure and system. And because we lack that, it is easier for anybody or for any government parastatal to come out and do what they like, right? How do you, I have not heard, except in cases of extremists where you have people resorting to violence, right? Now, but what happened yesterday was a peaceful protest. It was a peaceful. And so if you are to do anything, you are not supposed to deploy tear gas in any way, right? Now, so that was only possible because we lack system and structure. And may I say this to you, if a problem you don't acknowledge, it will be difficult for you to find solutions. So because Nigeria government is finding it hard to acknowledge that there is a problem that happened on October 20, 2020, they are finding it hard to find solution. And the solution is this simple. Nobody is taking responsibility. Nobody is saying anything about that incident on that day because they are living in denial. They have not come to accept the fact that something happened on that day. So because it is when you accept that there is a problem that you will find solution, but because they have not accepted the problem, so it becomes difficult. And they are piling up those lies, they are piling up those issues. And because they are still piling up, that's the result of what you saw yesterday. They are trying to cover up their excesses, and you cannot hide this forever. Really, look now, what's the essence of deploying tear gas for a peaceful protest? I've never seen that done, except on a case when there are violence, and that was not the case yesterday. So Nigeria is lacking system and they are lacking structure, and they are still living in self-denial. And until we come to the realization that something happened on October 2020, we will not move forward. We need Nigeria government to acknowledge the fact. For Canada, the system exists for the people, not the other way around. So if the system cannot favor people, then something is wrong. So we need to find out who is responsible for people. And that's always been a message for about 2 years now. And I'll keep saying it, and I'm saying it here again. Somebody needs to take responsibility for what happened. And it must come from the people in higher authority. It must come from people in power. And until we realize that, we cannot move forward.
Now, talking about taking responsibility, now, part of the people, we had the Lagos state government, we had the military, the police, the protesters. We also had another faction, which was the LCC, that's those in charge of the Lekki toll gate. Now, the Lekki toll gate incident led to the suspension of tolling by the Lekki concession company, that is the LCC. In the recommendation made by the judicial panel that the Lekki toll plaza be made a memorial site for the NSAS protest by renaming it to NSAS toll gate. Now, the Lagos state government said it would rather designate a park in the state and name it Peace Back. But in March, the LCC announced that tolling on the Lekki-Ikoyi Link Bridge will commence on April 1. Now, Deji, considering that the owners of the Lekki toll gate, that is the Lekki concession company, were found guilty of hampering the panel's investigation, which the panel said, now what rights do the LCC have on this reopening?
I had said it earlier. You see, the truth of the matter is this. when the accused is the one who is also sitting as the judge, then you're not going to get justice. Whatever the outcome will be, will definitely not be a fair one. It is simple. It's as straight as that. So now, if the Lagos State government, had implemented the recommendations of the panel of inquiry, as it were, the LCC would not go out and flout those orders. But the truth of the matter is that the government did not make those orders, and so the LCC is actually not flouting anything, because there were no orders. It was merely recommendations from the panel to the state government, which the state government had the choice of deciding whether to take or not. And so the state government, as it is, has chosen not to take the recommendations. And that's just it. You see, the truth of the matter is this: nothing has changed. There's still no accountability. There are quite a lot of those people. We're even fixated on Lagos. There were panels, about 28 states set up panels of inquiry. Have you heard of one prosecution that came out from any of those reports sent by those 28 panels, the 28 panels in the 28 states? That is, assuming they all submitted reports. Have you heard that one officer was prosecuted? I know that the National Human Rights Commission set up a panel itself in Abuja, and that panel several times sent invitations to the former head of the IGP IRT unit, Abba Kyari. He never honored it, and of course they do not have the powers to arrest him or do anything. And that was the end, and so nothing happened. Of course, they made recommendations that we don't know what they are, but I assume that recommendations would include investigation and prosecution. Now, those recommendations were sent to the Attorney General of the Federation. None of these people have been prosecuted. In Anambra State, there was the case of James Nwafo. He was, in fact, allegedly given a free passage out of the country. No accountability. And so because there was no accountability, there's still the existence of impunity. Policemen still go about their duties just the way they have been doing it. They continue to harass people. So yes, the LCCI did not flout any orders of this Lagos State government. The Lagos State government failed to make any orders. It has failed to act on the recommendations of the Judicial Panel of Inquiry. And it is the same thing in all of the other states. So I think we need to actually get to a point where we are going to admit that the government has failed to take lessons away from NSAS. Because yes, what we should actually be considering is this: if we had learned lessons, we would have learned that to prevent in future events like the NSAS protest, and of course the outcome of all of that, the violence that eventually ended it, if we have learned, what the government would be doing is how to implement these recommendations, how to ensure that those who were allegedly involved in brutality, torture, and extrajudicial killings are prosecuted and made to face the law. But we're not doing so. It is clear that the government is not sincere, and we're not going to make headway until that is put in place.
Okay, Dabira, over to you. Now, looking at the recommendations of the panel, being objective here, I know that you dealt with some of the victims. You said it yourself, even on this panel right here, that you were there at the Lekki toll gate when this happened. Now, the panel recommended compensation for these victims. Do you know if this has been followed through by the Lagos State government?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very, very sure that the recommendation from the panel has not been implemented. But recently, the Lagos State government reached out to the victims of NSAS. Not the Lagos State government, sorry. The governor himself reached out to the victim of NSAS and said he was supporting them, with something to augment. And I was in that meeting having that conversation, and I said, what has happened is beyond just, trying to, give patches, even though it's something, literally. And I suggested that we have a receipt, like let it be a conference, let it be a coming together of a few of the frontliners and concerned people that can actually recommend, or let us work with the implementation, the recommendation that the panel has given. But yeah, he went ahead, he said he was doing that out of his own sole will to reach out to the, victims. And then 2 of the victims that were amputees got prosthetic legs, and so far that is what has been done. And he said it has nothing to do with the implementation of the panel. So I guess, maybe they are trying to avoid, openly taking responsibility because it might be said, it might be translated into admitting. I think people didn't just want to admit that something has happened, but the Lagos State governor himself reached out.
Okay, all right. I thank you for that clarification. Now, Mayowa, since the 2020 protests, this protest has become quite phenomenal. Now, if you notice, even from yesterday's when there's been a major clampdown on protests in Nigeria, I don't think we've heard of one successful protest in Nigeria. Now, would you call this a sense of fear for the government, or are they just trying to avoid a hijack of protests as clear in the NSAS protests? And where does this all place the freedom of expression and democracy in Nigeria?
Thank you. So let me quickly chip in this. Under my foundation, right? So biannual, we have a work that we usually do. So create some sort of awareness and youth empowerment across the country. And this year we are supposed to have that. But unfortunately, I couldn't because of the fear of the government hijacking a peaceful walk. All right. And so if I, as a person, is having a challenge in doing what I feel will benefit the country, put us in that global sphere, that global space of influence, if as a person is scared of doing that, then it means that something is wrong with democracy, right? Because in democracy, you're supposed to be free. In democracy, there's supposed to be peace. In democracy, there's supposed to be responsive and responsible government. In democracy, there should be transparency. In democracy, there shouldn't be anything called a black box. The black box is when something goes into the system and you cannot see what happens in the transformation process, right? Now, so if this is not the case, then it means that democracy might likely be a thing of the past in Nigeria. We might think we're experiencing democracy, but we are not, because people are not fit to express themselves. Like yesterday, people were not free to have a peaceful protest. People were not free to have a peaceful walk. So it means that democracy is an elaborate statement right now that I feel that is not something that is applicable in Nigeria, because the government have made us so steady, and I think that's what they want to achieve. Okay. But we thank God that we have a generation, a Sorosuke generation, that is not relenting, that is not giving up on their plight, on their cause. And I believe that all we just need is a responsive and a responsible government that can truly hold the tenacity of the tenet of democracy.
Now, JG, Amnesty International gave a report yesterday. It said about more than 40 protesters arrested during the anti-police brutality demonstrations are still in detention. Now, if that is true, what is the fate of these protesters? And in the case of illegal detentions, can we say that Nigeria has competent lawyers and courts to adjudicate in these matters? Deji, can you hear me? Okay, Deji, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Now, you see, the point is this. The whole the efforts that were made by the law enforcement agents during the protest to pick up protesters was nothing more than an attempt to intimidate and scare people, like Mayowa said earlier. Now, yesterday, quite a lot of people who ordinarily would have joined in the protest were scared, were afraid, having, of course, seen the experience from 2010, 2010. Now, they have succeeded in cowing people, in intimidating and harassing people. Quite a lot of the protesters who are still there, a number of them have not even been prosecuted. They are not trying them. And others are currently undergoing trial. Most of them at their cost. Some of them, of course, getting legal support. But a lot of them, their careers, their jobs, their families, their academics have been stalled because of this. Now, what do you really expect that we will? It's deliberate. The DSS, the police, they deliberately went after protesters to intimidate and harass. They are succeeding, and it is agreeable that is not something that we should have in a democracy, like Mayowa said earlier, which I quite agree with. And that is now an indication that our democracy is dangerously ebbing to the edge. And if we as citizens, as responsible citizens, media, activists, academia, and civil society organizations do not speak out and do not protest against this, what will happen eventually is that they will eventually make everybody succumb and fall in line. So it is important that we keep talking about those people who are there so that they do not eventually succeed in cowing all of us and chasing us out of the streets, away from the opportunity to exercise our rights to freedom of expression and freedom of dissent. Thank you.
Okay, Dabira, a lot of pleas were started in October 2020, good governance, end to bad governance, police reforms and all that. Now, how do you think that the government can be more responsive to the demands of the youth as we edge towards 2023?
I think it's a good question, and at the right time. First off, I would is my opinion that the government should identify with the likes of youths that have come out as advocates and that are doing remarkable movements in improving the values of our system. That was why I kept saying to every interview that I've been to yesterday, like, we can't keep taking this action and this is the response we are getting. We need to come to have a consensus, like there has to be a closure somewhere. Now the government should call up on youths and intelligent youths for that matter that can come up with a template, and first of all, let them implement the 5-for-5. That way, we know they are listening. We know they are leaders and not rulers. Because as far as I'm concerned, what I'm perceiving, is that we have rulers that don't listen. They only intimidate and rule. They do whatever they choose to. And we will not want to sit to have a consensus without them, first of all, laying the foundation of implementing what led to the aftermath of NSAS. So 5-for-5 is not for the fact that they are even, going to implement the panel request. It was a one that sets the agenda for NSAS. They should implement that 5-for-5 in actual fact, not in paper. Because I met with some police officers that told me their salary has not been increased. They still live in terrible barracks and stuff like that. Okay. That 5-for-5 goes first, after which we can now come together and have a memorandum, of understanding, or what do you call it?
All right,
identify with people.
From what you're saying, there's a whole lot that the government needs to do. Being leaders and not rulers, listen to the pleas of the youths, even as we inch towards 2023. Unfortunately, we'll continue to have these conversations later on, but I'll have to let you go at this point in time. Thank you so much, Dabira, Mayowa, and Deji, for joining us on this conversation. Thank you so much. And right now, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we switch gears to Chad. Do stay tuned.